Congratulations on making it to the summary of this course. So the course obviously is simplifying complex fractions. And so what I want to do is just go through a quick little video to kind of summarize the process that hopefully I want you to take away through completing this course. So when simplifying complex fractions, the main important thing we want to do is put it in its simplest term or simplest form. And to be able to do that, we got to get rid of the fractions because remember the complex number has the fraction in the numerator, denominator, or in both. So to do that, we worked on a couple different ways to eliminate the fraction. And those two different ways I'm going to kind of highlight in our tips and tricks, which is one, multiply by the LCD, and two, which would be the multiply by the reciprocal of your denominator. All right? So those are kind of your two tips and tricks, but as you've kind of noticed, some of these problems are a little more complicated, right? It's just not as easy as a simple fraction over another fraction. A lot of them had expressions, rational expressions that we had to combine first of all. So my last two tips and tricks are going to be simplify first and then simplify last. And what I mean by that is when you're looking at a problem, always try to see, can you simplify the numerators? Can you simplify the denominators? There's something we can do to make them simple because if we're going to apply these two processes, we got to make sure it's in simplified form. Then after we've applied these two processes, or one or the other, then we got to make sure we can simplify them, right? Reduce any fractions we have, eliminate any terms by dividing to 1. So now let's go and look at some common mistakes. And when we look at common mistakes, one thing that I look at, when I'm looking at the LCD method, is students don't know how to find the LCD between two denominators. Not too bad are students when I have two common fractions with numbers. They say, oh, well, what is the common denominator? We'll have 3 and 4. So what is the least common denominator of 3 and 4? Well, a lot of times, you just list out the multiples of both denominator. And in this case, you can see that the multiple is the denominator. The smallest number that they're both going to divide into would be 12. But the problem a lot of times that we come into is, what happens if I bring in an x and then I subtract an x? And this is where a lot of students get confused. And they say, well, I don't know how these two denominators, what they're going to have in common. Well, again, looking back into the LCD, not always is the LCD, let's see, if I give you two numbers, 6 and 2. The LCD, in this case, is going to be 6. However, a common multiple of these two is also 12, right? And the reason I got 12 is you can multiply the 6 times 2 is 12. However, we can reduce the LCD to be 6 because 6 and 2 both divide into 6. However, when you're looking into these two, 4x does not divide into 3 minus x, nor does 3 minus x divide into 4x. So therefore, when I'm looking for my LCD, I just need to simply multiply these two terms, and there you go. Now I have the LCD of these two denominators. The next thing I'm going to go through as far as common mistakes is when dealing with the reciprocal part of that. And again, the reciprocal part is the exact same thing. If I had 3/4 divided by 1/3. Again, we're multiplying by the reciprocal. And a lot of students I get confused. You just need to make sure that whatever you multiply your denominator by, you have to make sure you multiply your numerator by. Otherwise, you're not going to produce an equivalent fraction, and therefore your answer is going to be wrong. So we got to make sure that when we're multiplying, we're producing equivalent fractions. The last thing, kind of common mistakes, which goes in with your tips and tricks. What was I going to do? I guess the tips and tricks are kind of like make sure you find the LCD, make sure you multiply the reciprocal to produce equivalent fractions. And the last thing is simplifying. I get so many students with their common mistakes as they don't simplify at the end or they don't simplify at the beginning, especially with complex fractions when we have to combine. Because remember, when we're dealing with a complex fraction, we have to have a fraction over another fraction. So if I have to subtract these two, if I have, let's say, 3 minus x plus 4 divided by x squared divided by 1 over x minus 1. So if I have this complex fraction, I got to combine this numerator so it's as one fraction. Then I can apply the two processes. And that's a very big common mistake. Students a lot of times just multiply everything out, but it's very helpful to combine these first, and then you can go and simplify. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is just a quick little summary of common mistakes as well as some tips and tricks. Thanks.